Hello and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Before we get started, remember you can connect with us on all of our socials as One Geek 411, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come chat with us on our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Check out the show notes on our website, onegeek411.com, and watch live on Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time for our regular podcast show. So find all our videos on YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out our sweet merch at our Redbubble store. I'm Shanine, and with me I have my fellow tabletop RPGers, Emma
Hi.
and Cameron.
Hello, hello.
Super excited to be talking Tales and Typos by J.E. Tankersley tonight.
Sorry.
Why? There we go.
I was making sure podcast stuff was going or like stream stuff was actually happening and looked away.
Do it for the thumbnail. All right. So, Tales and Typos is a collection of 20 short stories inspired by tabletop role-playing games. In these stories, we glimpse snippets of many adventurers' tales, from epic battles to rest by the campfire, victory to heartbreak, their origins to their journey's end. In Tankersley's own words in the foreword, Tales and Typos is a collection of stories inspired by memories and make-believe. Some are true retellings of moments from around my living room coffee table, while others were simply inspired by the people I've met, the places I've been, and the magical things I've seen while playing pretend. What is everyone's first impressions?
I loved it. I thought it was fun, and it was great to, first of all, to read short stories for the first time in a little while, because they're great, but also to, read little snippets of other people's adventures from their tables, and, obviously a lot of D&D is, theater of the mind or whatever, but it was fun to, see those adventures crafted into a story on paper and in a different format and sort of, I wouldn't say trim's not the word, consolidated / made coherent for a bigger story setting.
Trying to think of how I want to say this. I think it was fine. I'm gonna just say that. There are definitely some in this that I really liked, but this was, for me. I and this may be the point. Since they were all short stories, I just found it being a lot of them such quick in and outs that I just felt like I never really got invested. There are some really cool plot hooks that if I was DMing, some of these situations would show up, but I feel like this suffered from being short stories.
Yeah.
Or from these short stories being so short. We'll say it that way.
And or ending in the middle of a climax, which is great on occasion, but not when you do it so frequently.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I liked getting little snippets because we never got any characters' full story, but we did get different parts of what could be a full character's story from different people. We've got their origin, or we've got a big epic battle, we've got just traveling. We got all the parts of an adventure from a bunch of different perspectives. So while we didn't get to get invested in any particular characters. I think it was just fun.
Yeah. And I think one of the good examples of that is Barnabas. I just wanted to go look up the name to make sure I had it right. Is Barnabas. That like he's kind of the wizard character that exists throughout some of the stories. And I think that he is like a very cool example of what you're talking about, where we only really get him in like 2 stories, but then he's referenced as a character in other ones. So you kind of get that other background.
Is he also the professor, or is that a different character?
Professor's a different person.
Okay.
But yes, I think that is cool. And again, saying that the reason I disliked this may be literally the point and what other people love about it. But yeah, that is my first impression.
So, as lovers of tabletop RPGs, how did you expect such adventures to translate to the page?
I mean, I feel like we see it work so well in translation to other medias, like through art and drawing and animation even, that like obviously it's hard to translate the humor of any given moment in writing in a story that you get when you actually play. You don't get the awkward pauses and the like the scrambling for an idea of how to react to whatever situation you're in, and you don't get the sense of like, oh no, I just rolled a nat 1, like what's gonna happen. It is more just purely the story driven or storytelling, so like the game aspect doesn't translate as well. But if you have a knowledge of gameplay going into it, then you can go, oh, that was clearly a terrible roll in that moment. Like, but if you don't have that background, you wouldn't really sort of get that in reading it. But it was fun to like, with having that knowledge, like at least read and go like, I wonder what the conversation was like leading up to that moment.
I think for me, like, if you have talked to anyone that has played D&D, even someone that's like an awful storyteller, like you just have to know that D&D makes, or tabletop RPGs as a whole, make awesome stories. Like, and it's very cool seeing, again, like I really liked the writing in this book. Like, again, I know I kind of came out with it's fine, but like I think Tankersley does a really good job at like describing what's going on and making those situations feel like when I'm having a conversation with my friend Steve and he's telling me about one of the 3 D&D games that he's playing right now. And so like it felt like these are the type of stories that you talk about with your friends, where again, the short stories, it's literally the point, but like I don't know the backstory of all the people in the game he's DMing. Like, I just know this one chunk of this one story that he told me. And so it really much, it's very much had that feel. And I think that that's a really cool representation.
Yeah, I think as with any translation of D&D or tabletop RPGs to any other medium, it's really, I don't want to say easy, but easier to translate like the fantasy story part of it. Whereas the rest of like the gameplay and the camaraderie around the table is really hard to capture. Because while it doesn't like seem like part of the story, it's a huge part of it. So, but yeah, I think they were pretty much what you could have expected. Like, yeah, they just seem like telling fun stories about cool things you did with your RPG group. All right. So, knowing that these stories were inspired by RPG adventures, did that make you think about the stories any differently than just regular fantasy stories?
Yeah, I'll say 100%, kind of to echo what Emma was just saying. like you very much read through it, and I'll bring this up in a future question. But there are very much some moments that you see of like, I think that was rule of cool. Of like, or like to what she was saying earlier, I'm pretty sure you rolled a nat 1 here. Like if this is like based on a real situation from a table, like everyone rolled very poorly here.
And so, it did not go well.
Right. And it did not like
for anyone involved.
Yeah. And I think that that's so cool. And it definitely, it brings a different mindset in, because one of the things that's fun about RPGs, especially as this collaborative medium, is that you don't get to have control. There is that element of luck involved where, like, if I'm writing Legend of Vox Machina, slight spoiler here, but like there's a scene in that show where they're trying to pick a lock to get in. Like, if I'm writing that story, I'm going to want my characters involved in the story, not locked outside. But because that happened, that's really affects the story, and then the characters have to play that. And so I definitely found myself reading this and trying to think of like, where is this one that was made up or like inspired by, or is this like literally something that happened at the table? And I think that that's a fun like mini game to be playing as you read, like, or as I read, just kind of being like, oh, I bet this is what happened in this situation, or I bet this is how the DM ruled here, or something like that. Or I bet this was their outro for this one campaign, kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, like, we do see a lot of characters show up throughout the other short stories, but I was starting to notice like some of them you see with different characters in different parties and stuff as well. And I was kind of wondering, I'm like, ooh, did some other characters die and they had to roll new characters, or did some people like leave the group in real life and like new players came in? Like, I wonder what all these party changes.
What's the tea?
What's going on?
What's the drama? Spill.
Yeah. It was fun to like wonder what was going on in real life behind the story.
Yeah. I do think that's one of the big draws of TTRPGs in general, no matter what system or whatever, is it's not just another game. It's something to do with your friend group, and the outcome and the shenanigans are as much influenced by the relationships in the group as it is by the rules. So I think, that sort of goes back to like, you don't really see that in this because it's a different format. It's a book rather than the actual game. But if you're familiar with the base construct of the game, then it is, as Cameron said, kind of a mini game of like, you then get to construct your own mental scenario of how did that play out in real life based on your own experiences.
All right. What was your favorite part of Tales and Typos as a whole, and your favorite short story?
Maybe it's because I'm like literally the worst, but I guess I'm gonna start with my favorite short story, which is Foraging in the Dark, which is the TPK where all the party dies because they all very clearly rolled nat 1s on their perception check, and they get jumped. So I'm a sucker for any time like some like the party gets got, and like especially in that sense where like it doesn't really have anything to do with a later story from what I can tell. Like, this is very much just like, again, not how you would typically write a story. Like, it doesn't tie in. There's no real context here. It's just, here's this party. They got.
It just happened. It's just a thing that happens.
Yeah. So I really liked that one. And then my favorite moment is in Shadow Magic, where Chamomile does the shadow puppetry to impress the door.
Yeah.
And the door is just like mad impressed. I love that.
That was hilarious.
That made me smile so much. Like there's that whole interaction between Chamomile and the door. It was so cool.
I really liked. I mean, I think my favorite short story was the one with Lavender going to the random park in the middle of nowhere. Partially because she was just like, yeah, this person who I know sent me a letter and said to go here, and was just completely trusting of that.
I think that's
And
Artemis
second
Park.
of all, yeah,
Yeah.
Artemis Park. And second of all, she just shows up, and this random person is like, I want to offer you a job to essentially be what is essentially a game master here of these animals. Like, that's just dream job for me. So like, I guess that's why I like it. But she was just like, okay, I'm gonna trust this, and then she shows up and is like, I get a job now. It's very basic, but it's a fun look into someone's sort of backstory of just like, it's not fighting off monsters and it's not solving puzzles. It's just like, I ended up somewhere because someone said something.
Yeah, I don't know. I like wrote a like one sentence synopsis of all the short stories just so I'd remember what they were all about. Um, Foraging in the dark. I have one of my notes is danger tentacles.
Danger Tentacles.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
That's accurate.
yeah, I don't. It's hard to pick a favorite because I'm like, oh, I like a lot of these for different reasons. I think one of them I like is Man in the Water. They're in the moon mire and they're about to be eaten by monsters, and then this man shows up and they're all super sus of him, and then he ends up being a super OP wizard that saves them all. I just like that.
I'm gonna death glare you to death, essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun ones. But I think in general, my favorite thing about Tales and Typos was just like the deep enjoyment of story and tabletop RPGs. Like I read just the foreword and was like, yes, like this is my life's motto.
Yeah, I will wholeheartedly agree with that. I think this is the best foreword of any book I've ever read. Like,
yes.
It is so engaging. Like, to just say that of the foreword, like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Of something I normally skip in books,
Right.
I read the entire thing and was like, I love it. I think he actually says something in there that stuck in my mind, but I can't remember what.
Yeah.
Had something to do with like taxes or whatever.
3 quotes from the foreword because it was just so good.
Adventures are so often like that. They happen in the blink of an eye. Pillows become shields, broom handles become blades, feathers become flames. I really like that. Okay, there's one of my quotes.
Yeah. And I think one of my quotes probably comes like immediately after that. And it's because to them, meaning children, it is real. Or at the very least, it's as real as anything can ever hope to be. Like, that's kind of, I don't know, if you could come up with a theme for my life, stories are real.
Yeah.
All right. Least favorite part and or story.
So I'll say for me, this ties in with what I said at the beginning. With this being like less of an anthology, I really just felt like I never got to know a lot of the characters. Like, as we were saying towards the beginning, like it's really cool that you get references to different characters through each other. Like we used Barnabas as the example of that earlier, where like I think Barnabas shows up in 2 stories. He's referenced in Artemis Park. I think he's referenced in one other one. But I could be wrong there. It might just be those 3. But like, I felt like that kind of boiled down a lot of characters to, this is the wizard guy. or this is the ranger, and I feel like, and this is much better than the other way, but I feel like that left me really wanting more of this. Like really wanting more of these characters, really wanting more of these stories, which, like I said, that's much better than the other way, cough, Treasure Island, cough, of just wanting it to be over. But I just, because it was that, I just kind of felt like it was hard for me to get invested in these characters when I didn't know if they were going to show up again. The professor is like a great example of that, where here's this pretty interesting character that's introduced in the second to last short story. And like, I mean, this is interesting, but I don't care because odds are they're not showing up in the next story. Like, I just found it.
It's such a comical character too. Like, in such a put in a situation that's so out of his zone.
Yeah, and like I said, I just wish I got to know the characters more, because I think there are some super awesome ones. We'll talk about those in a future question, but I just wish I got to know them more, which is much better than some of the complaints we've had about other books. So
yeah, I'm definitely in a similar boat. I do kind of wish that, like, the stories had been expanded to some extent. Kind of as I mentioned earlier, like, I didn't really like how a lot of them ended in the middle of the action. But like, if those stories had been expanded throughout and still ended in whatever that moment was, that would have been okay. If I felt like I'd seen more of that story throughout anyway. Whereas it's just like, that's it. Like, I don't mind not knowing what happens. I mind that I don't get to see more of those people in that scenario. I think that was my biggest thing.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like I'm not quite as down on it as you are. I don't know. I feel like the fun stories were just like fun and exciting for fun, and the more serious ones, like even though we weren't totally invested in the characters, it was still interesting to think about like the emotions and the journey that the characters were going through at that moment. So, like that was interesting enough for me to have, I guess, enough investment to be interested. But yeah, it definitely did leave me wanting more.
Yeah, I mean, and I think overall, that being the complaint is much better than the middle 5 of these stories were awful, like, or something like that. And so, like, I think that I wanted more is if I was an author and that was the complaint people had about my book.
Yeah.
I would love that. Is they want me.
I would much rather hear I want more than I want less.
Right.
Yeah, I've definitely read some short story anthologies where it's like, well, one of those was good.
Right.
The rest were not.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I can't even pick a least favorite short story. They're
yeah,
all good.
Completely agree. I was gonna. So this is kind of a Twitter conversation that we've been having around the idea of ranking things. And so that's kind of was on my mind as I was reading through some of these. And I think, again, to your point, if I was going to tier list these, like, I feel like I have a clump at the top and like S, a clump in A, and a clump in B, and then there's nothing below that. And like, I feel like that's, again, as far as the least favorite part is, I wish more of those B's were A's, is basically where I'm like. Yeah.
All right, on to characters. Who was your favorite character? And could be the same or could be different. What character would you want to play in a campaign?
I liked the professor. Professor Footwood? Footfeet?
Fenwick Frazzlefoot.
Fenwick Frazzlefoot. I really like him. Great character. Great, like, bit of a space cadet. Just sort of, you're very, basic trope of a space cadet professor in fantasy and stuff, but like it's a trope that never fails to crack me up.
Yeah.
Like he shows up to the wrong classroom, right time, wrong classroom, and just starts lecturing the custodian about whatever, only to realize he's in the wrong classroom and then runs across campus, papers flying behind him. I love that. Cracks me up every time.
He was
I,
incredibly delightful.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Oh yeah. And just ends up like in this scenario where he's like, does anybody speak frog? No? Anybody? No? Like, I think that would be such a fun character to play, of just like very skilled in this one very specific thing that's not relevant to the real world in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah.
Shanine, what about you?
I mean, I also really enjoyed the professor. I liked Jimothy Toeshine III just for his name.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to
Love
literally all of the like stereotypical tabletop RPG names that are in this book.
Yeah.
Like I'm impressed we didn't have Boblin the Goblin kind of thing. just for the
Yeah.
reference. Like I loved it.
Yeah.
Edgy the Hedgy Hedgehog.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like
There was a one-off character I made one time. Edgy the Hedgy Hedgehog. No, Hedgy the Edgy Hedgehog.
Nice. Yeah, I also liked chamomile and lavender. Some good plant names
mm-hmm.
and good characters. Chamomile was a cleric and lavender was
Ranger?
something. Which story is she from?
She's in the water one.
Lavender. Halfling Ranger.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, she was cool.
She's in Small Victories is the one that she shows up first. It's the one about water that doesn't have water in its title. So
she's also in Into the Moonfire.
Yeah. For me, chamomile is my favorite. Shout out again. This ties in with what you're asking about earlier, and I said this in our pre-show chat. There is 100% chance that Tankersley plays halflings. Like, there are any cool character in this book is a halfling, or like a gnome, or like all of the small characters are the best characters. And so I don't know if this is like he literally played these characters, or if he but he 100% has played a halfling for a long time. And that love kind of comes out. I liked chamomile. Shout out to Shadow Magic as the story I referenced earlier. I love the idea of this like cleric ghost hunting basically in this house, trying to find this book and trying to survive all these traps and stuff like that. I really liked that story a lot. And also I feel like chamomile is one of the characters you get to know the most. They show up as the lead in quite a few stories, compared to just kind of being there for several. And so I really liked getting to see that character return. And then for character I would most like to play, it's the professor for all the reasons y'all have already mentioned. Like I don't have anything like overly new to add to that conversation, but I love this trope. I love the brilliant person that has no clue how to tie their shoes. I think that's such a fun space to play in. And so like if I was personally going to play like one of these characters, I would want it to be the professor, which I guess would be our whole party. But like we might not be a successful party. We might not know where we're going, but we're going to be successful when we get there. That's
pretty much
the understanding there.
Anyone you would want to play, Emma?
The professor.
Also the professor.
Also the professor.
Fair
That or a variation of the professor that instead of being a professor is that random archaeologist in that you see in a lot of like science fiction,
Mm.
like and or like The Mummy, where he just like screams back at the big bad evil guy.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone knows that scene, and I just love it. Like, because I feel like they're very similar tropes, but ever so slightly different, just based on their professions.
Mm-hmm.
I was personally really taken by Marigold. She's a gnome rogue, and I just think she sounds super cute. And I would that's totally a character that I would play.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we saw the world slowly built out as locations were revisited, and we saw the interconnectedness of the stories. What did you think of this fantasy world?
Well, it definitely had some giant squids, so we know it's believable.
It's very believable.
There's literally multiple chapters about danger tentacles. So
Multiple.
yes, it is extremely believable.
And fish heads.
And fish, yeah. I liked this world. I don't think it's anything necessarily to write home about. Like the world doesn't really feel like a character, and as it does in some other stories. But I feel like it's an enjoyable playground, and like I said, it's one of those that if I was DMing, I could definitely see myself stealing some of these story arcs to have jumping off points for games I was running.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think it does go back to the, like, they're all sort of, they're all short form, short stories, so it's, like, hard to get super deep into the different locations, even with the, like, revisiting of some of them. But what we did see of, parts of the world, like the swamp with the random guy creeping up, and like this mine that ends up in this big old cavern that just is endless dark or whatever, some strange things happening. Like, it's definitely, there's some fun moments there for jumping off into like creating adventures of your own, but it's hard to, at least for me, to create any final judgment, because it's just like you see so little of that world outside of this context. But overall, I liked it.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything spectacularly unique about it. It was kind of your basic fantasy world, which is frankly what you see in
Which is
a
lot of tabletop RPG.
RPGs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, it's about what I expected.
Like there's a little bit of everything. We've got some caves, we've got some ocean, we've got the towns. I think one of the most interesting places was probably the Whisperwood, which I think is only in one story, but we get to see the whisper gnomes that live there, who appear to be able to communicate telepathically through a symbol on their forehead. So that was pretty cool, and I would totally put that in a campaign.
Yeah,
that seemed really fun. All right, what tabletop RPG / fantasy elements, inspiration, or tropes stood out to you in either a liking or disliking way?
So this is both the pro and con for me. I love the Glass Cannon podcast. It's an actual play that's Pathfinder. One of the things that they're very good at is pretty much every show ends on a cliffhanger. And so I really like that way of storytelling, of just like it ended on a cliffhanger. Like I want to come back, but the fact that we almost never got paid off for those It was stuff that as a player, I would be so excited to come back the next week. Like you referenced Marigold, there's the scene where they're in the with the giant squid beast thing.
Yeah, under the ocean.
Yeah, under
with,
the
like,
ocean.
Some
I don't remember which chapter that was. A Voice in the Deep, maybe,
uh,
or Beneath the Sea.
Beneath the Sea.
Yeah.
Under the ocean.
You know, we were there. We were there. So like there's like that ending is so cool.
Yeah.
And
We need to go find this guy
oh well.
that you just watched die.
Yeah, and like I love that way of storytelling. Of like, oh, how are you? Like again, like you end the session, then that's like all the players. You all talk. How are you going to get out of this situation next time we play? I love that so much. But then likewise, there were so many of those that I was just like, okay, well, I want to know the end, but
there's the plant without the payoff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Similarly, that same one that you referenced, I liked the use of like the memory loss of that character, of that main character in that one, which you see a lot in like tabletop games, whether at the beginning of like you literally lost your memory post event and like you're on a quest to figure out or get it back or whatever. But I like how he got it, like he lost his memory right in the middle of this very awful situation rather than like waking up in a nice comfy bed in a hospital or whatever. Like it was oh, you're good, you're awake, let's fix this problem and break out of here.
Yeah. What stood out to me was I feel like there was a lot of Lord of the Rings inspiration, especially with like the Moonmire location. Like if someone had told them, don't follow the lights, I would not have been surprised. I'm like, yeah, this is a swamp. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always gonna like some Lord of the Ringsy fantasy stuff, so I enjoyed it.
Kind of to what we were referencing earlier, I love the end of the story. So like we kind of get that with Artemis Park, where we have this character that like, whether this is them like the player wants to just play someone new, and so you have this character retiring, or whether this is actually like the last session after a long campaign. I love getting to have that moment of closure of like, this character is not gone from the story, they're just doing this thing now, and here's how they're going to apply themselves in this world. I love that element, and getting to kind of see that character get to have that moment to find what they're passionate about. That's something else that I think is super cool that we can get through RPGs. Someday I'll have a character that lives long enough to get there.
Mood.
All right. So in the story, The All Cleric, we see a cleric covered in basically every holy symbol imaginable, and which is obviously something other characters are super curious about. And in the end, he explains it by saying, because I'll take all the help I can get. This got me thinking about religion in RPGs. What is or can be its purpose?
A good exploration of faith, I guess, in a very simplistic format. I mean, the way I'm kind of thinking about it is in a game, I can see how someone would feel more comfortable exploring that concept if they have doubts in a setting where there's no perceived consequences, like real world consequences, if you will. Um, but it is also a enjoyable way to explore morality.
Yeah, basically just going to echo exactly what Emma just said. I think that it's a great way of exploring something in that safe space. I think it's one of the strengths of tabletop RPGs as a whole. I think they reference it in the foreword of this book that everyone should read. Um, but the idea that it lets you just kind of explore those questions, and those don't strictly have to be about religion, of course. But I think that giving that imagination a place to run and explore, I think can be a very good exercise for people, especially people that have grown up with one lifestyle, whether belief or unbelief or whatever, for most of their life. I feel like it can give a good, what's this other side like? What would it be like for this character to live on the other end of my life experience?
Yeah. I think you guys have said that really well, so I won't add anything to that. But I will add that I think it also shows that creativity and faith do not have to be mutually exclusive.
Amen.
Yeah.
Can be about more than one thing.
Yeah.
Can both be creative and have faith.
Yeah.
Hard agree.
Yeah.
All right. How do you approach religion in your RPGs?
So, getting started, I'll just say shout out to our friends over at City on a Hill, which, Shanine will be on the next season of.
Yeah.
She shocked all of us, having not told any of us that was going on. So this is definitely something that they wrestle with a bit more than we do. And I know that Ryan has had some good conversations. I think he had a really good conversation on Mountain Nerds about it. Shout out to that episode. Hands up. I'm going to try to go find that and put it here. We'll see if I am correct. But I'll say, like, for me personally, it's not something I've had to deal too much with, just with the games that I've been in. My first game was not very story heavy, so we didn't really go too much into that. And for Shakar in our game, that's not really something that we've even remotely dove into. I don't know if Chris is going to pull any of that in specifically later on. But I did do a Discord game with a handful of people, and I was playing a warlock. And one of the actual big things I wanted to have at that character is, what is this deity situation for them? And so that was something that I worked on with Jarrett from the Infinity Bear from the Infinity Bros on. As I was working my backstory, is I wanted to have a reason and an understanding of the metaphysics or whatever for this belief manifesting for my warlock. But that's really the only time I've encountered it or had to address it, I guess.
Yeah, pretty similarly, I guess, for myself. But at the same time, I haven't really had a lot of chances to sort of explore it, if you will. I have just overall tried to, when I have played, been or had characters that are even if they're neutral or chaotic neutral or whatever, be generally decent people, just for morality's sake, if you will. But I think it is one of those things of I mean, I grew up in a household where I was exposed to all different religions. I grew up Catholic, but at the same time, we went and visited Vietnamese families on Christmas night and had Hindu families who would like bring us nice Christmas night meals or whatever, like all these different faiths that maybe don't practice the same thing as we do, just like celebrating with us and us with them for their weddings or whatever. Like, it's one of those things of like, sure, in the context of these games, it's going to be a fictional belief system, if you will. But it is a nice way to sort of put my own faith in a different context and like explore it in a way that is not a way I explore it in every day.
Yeah, I think I haven't actually played a lot of religious characters. Um, in a campaign that I was in a while ago, one of one of the people I was playing with was playing a priest, and it was interesting just to watch how he brought religion and faith into his playing. Um, he is a Christian, so it was, I think, kind of natural for him to be considering his faith in relation to his character. But then also interesting to watch him as the decisions he made affected his character's faith, and and not always for the better. And just like being able to explore doubt, even that that's possible in RPGs. Um, I think that the characters that I have played who have any sort of religious bent have been the ones who are really struggling with darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. I think we'd be lying if we said that we never struggled with darkness in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being able to explore that and work through it in an RPG setting is not a bad way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I'll go ahead and segue us into your next question, because I think what you said perfectly answers that too. How can religious themes in RPGs apply to our real life faith? Like, I think you said that in such a beautiful way there. Like, it gives us that space to wrestle with things and to see our own faults in our characters and play through them and like role play through what's going on. And so
I haven't really thought about this one much. I mean, it is, like, I definitely agree. It is a good space in which to wrestle with those questions that we have in a way that is more comfortable for some people. Yeah, I don't know, honestly.
All right. Are there any other themes that you noticed throughout the short stories that stood out to you?
I think a major theme we see is the idea of like expectations versus reality. There's definitely a lot of characters that come in with but I was told adventuring would be fun and I'd get to be a part of all of these things. And like that's a big part of the story that I referenced at the beginning, the forging in the dark. Like that's a big part of that story. Is the like I didn't think this isn't worth the money. This is it, and then it's definitely not worth the money. as they get TPK'd. But like, I think that there's a handful of that theme throughout, that when we go in with high expectations or with only a limited perception, we often are disappointed. And it's one of the things I thought was funny for me as I was reading through those times is it really made me think of social media, which I thought was, again, ironic considering this is a book about fantasy worlds, making me think of technology. But kind of the idea that when you look at people on social media, that it's always such a limited window into somebody's life. And you have some people that are going to be real and that are going to post about what's really going on. And then you have some people that are just always going to post that smiling picture because that's what you're supposed to do. And they don't want to look vulnerable or don't want people to know what's really going on. And so, yeah.
And even sort of another extension of that we see in this is putting pressure on oneself, like in those contexts, like feeling, not necessarily feeling, but like pressuring yourself to accomplish something beyond what you're currently capable of doing, via like perfectionism or whatever. Like you do see a bit of that, as well as just a sense of pressure from a source that's made up inside your own imagination.
All right, our favorite part. Bring out your quotes.
Bring out your dead.
So Emma and I were chatting about this before you got on the call, Shanine. We both completely forgot to do anything with quotes. And one of the things that I shared is I always feel weird when like one of my favorite quotes is like the beginning or end of the book, because it's very much the like high school student that forgot to do the assignment and then just like flipped to the last page. But here we are. Some things never change. So this is like literally the last like 2 sentences of the book, from the chapter called Journey's End. She knew now that putting pen to paper would be a journey for which there is no end, that no number of days or drafts could truly capture it, not really anyway. After all, adventures are meant to be lived, but a tale is only as good as its telling. So I really liked that. Kind of tying in with another one of the themes, which is it's the stuff that's in between that makes things memorable. Like there's always those highlight moments, but then there is the day-to-day. There is the real life side of things that you can just never really put down on paper in the same way. Bob Goff has a quote that's quality time happens in quantity time.
Yeah.
That you can't just force amazing. Amazing happens because you're putting in the work every day is kind of how I've internalized that quote. And that last couple sentences kind of spoke to me in that same way, that as you're trying to recapture these memories, and again, thinking of this probably being a lot of Tankersley's real playing of characters, a real party that he was playing with, there's a lot of that side is it's like, well, you can't put all the details, all those conversations, all those little things into a story. And we kind of get him outroing him trying to tell them this through this other character. And I thought that was really cool. And that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah. I also had one that I found from the fire about the church burning down, where it's the knight inside talking to the bad guy, and he's like, you know what the difference is between you and me? When I put you back in whatever hole you crept out of, the people will say, we're saved, the monster is dead, all's right in the world. But when I die, he paused and spat something red onto the floor. They'll say that the world's lost a legend. And then he dies and gets called a legend. Just spoiler alert for that one story. Um, but like, I remember in that moment reading that, thinking, "Wow, you're a bit egotistical." And then he gets called a legend, and I'm like, "Okay, still a little bit egotistical,
But
but
accurate.
accurate." Like, you're already calling yourself a legend. Uh, but then at the same time, you're kind of right. Like, when you put in that kind of effort to protect people, like, it's a little bit rude, but also you're not wrong with the way the society works today. So, yeah.
All right, I've got a few quotes. Some of them I just picked because I'm just so like jealous of them as sentences. I'm like, these are amazing and I just love it. So the first one I'm pretty sure is from The Hush, where we see Marigold. It has nothing to do with Marigold, but so shadows stretched like sleepy house cats across the dusty furniture and forgotten keepsakes, and the only sound splitting the silence was the steady tick of an old grandfather clock in the misty display window. And I just love that sentence. I'm like, dang, you set that scene so well. Like I can feel it. It's good.
So good.
And then this next one is from the brush pile. Um, the Gilded Gopher was, by all accounts, a typically tranquil, happy go lucky sort of tavern in a not so famous village somewhere between no place special and the middle of nowhere. And I just love that. Like, you so over explained it.
But at the
But it's
same
perfect.
right, and at the same time, it's like there's no wasted words there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like it is such a perfect description. Yeah.
Yeah. And this last one is from Man in the Water. A soft smile tugged at the edges of Arya's lips. It had been months since she'd taken the time to listen to the sounds of the forest, and longer still since she truly heard them. Sharing that partly because the sentence, once again, is just so good. All the sonorant S's and everything. Love it. But also, just like, she's a druid, and it's important for her to be connected to the natural world, and there that you have to take the time to listen, but also there's still something deeper than just listening. You have to really hear what's being said, and that just kind of reminded me of my Lent walks right now that I haven't taken in like a week, but the ones that I did take were really good. Just like, it has been months since I've been outside because winter in Canada sucks. And
Because
so, like,
you've said you've had snow 3 times since the start of spring.
yeah.
Rough.
But yeah, it's been months since I've been able to take the time to just be out in the world and listen. And also, being out there is connecting me more with myself and with God as well. And like making me realize that it's been a while since I've really taken the time to invest in that as well. So yeah, it's important to just take that time to be. All right. What moment from a campaign you have played would you want to write a short story about?
I did a one-off. It's not a campaign because ours is the only campaign I've been in. But I did a one-off with some friends from high school where we all essentially traveled into the belly of a giant whale to like discover some missing persons because we're all like marine biology nerds. And someone made a joke in our chat of like to our DM, and was like, "We want something with whales." So she was like, "Great, you guys are gonna go into the belly of a whale and rescue some missing people." We thought she was joking, and she wasn't, and it was great. And I would love to write a story about that.
For me, I mean, I guess some of the challenge of it is I don't know how it's going to go. I really liked our on the roof scene from the most recent Faithful Hedrons game. I really liked that. And I liked the ending of it. I think that
When
was.
we chucked the chest over and it
It
exploded.
might have slipped. That might be Shakar's fault. But
Nida?
might but yeah, I really liked that scene. That's one that definitely jumps out to me. From my Discord game, one of the things about my character's backstory, I really liked, and we got to kind of have a moment. Really, it was just between Jarrett and I because how I was able to like finagle the actual progression of the story, and so I had a moment where my character was able to get away from the rest of the party to kind of have this conversation with their mentor character. And I think that was a very cool moment. One of those that I don't know if other people would like to read it, but it was a really cool piece of role play that I really enjoyed that Jarrett and I got to have. So
Yeah. So, I don't know, a few moments come to mind. I mean, of course, Poppy going for a casual shopping trip,
derailing everything,
joining a rebellion.
making us
You know.
fugitives all for a crossbow.
Just wanted to
Now we have wanted posters up all over.
We're not wanted. We're in
Yeah.
jail.
We are.
I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
you
we
know,
are
we
captured.
might have wanted posters.
But like that's a super fun one for me. I mean, a bunch of my nerdy friends who are partly to blame for me being into tabletop RPGs. We were just playing this random, I think it was only supposed to be for one night anyway, and my friend was playing, I don't even remember what he was playing, but he found on like a billboard like a posted arrow, and you're supposed to like follow the arrow to get to whatever, except he took the arrow with us, and then wherever he pointed the arrow was where we had to go. And just the whole time he's like, follow the arrow. And so we would just have to go wherever this piece of paper pointed us, depending on which way he was holding it. It was ridiculous. And also for an epic moment in the campaign that I'm playing with my husband right now, I'm playing a paladin, and she just took out a corrupt governor, and it was an incredibly badass moment with the epic speech and a sudden like throat slice. It was great.
Nice. Get him.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap up, would you read more if Tankersley was to put out more?
Yes. I would.
Yep. I think for me, it depends. I feel like my evaluation for this question is always one of two things. It's either no, I wish they would not write as much, or it's yes, but I wish they would be more focused. And I feel like this falls into the yes, I wish they would be more focused camp. Like that was kind of where I was at, even with like with Binti and some of those other stories, Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, or like it's like I'd like to see them write something a little different. So like if it was just another collection of short stories, I don't 100% know if I would read it. But if it was like 3 medium stories, you have my attention. Or more of like the novella style that we got to see with Binti. Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely something that would make me want to read it. I really like Tankersley's writing style. For a lot of what you said earlier, Shanine. But I want more resolution to the stories than we got here.
Yeah.
Personally, I am down for more. It was a good time. It was a chill, relaxed read, which is nice sometimes, mm-hmm. And it was just fun.
Fun times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty quick read. That's why I enjoyed it.
Yep.
All right. Yes or no? Do you recommend Tales and Typos?
Depends on the person I'm talking to, but for this general crowd, yes.
Yeah, I'd say yes as well.
Yes, all around.
Shanine's like, no, I loved it, but I don't recommend.
No, definitely don't. All right. Our next book club will be on April 28th. And this time, Chris, we will be reading The Robe by Lloyd C. Douglas.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So remember, come chat with us on our social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as OneGeek411. There it is.
Took me a little bit to get there.
Yeah.
On our
I'm
Discord
in the last
server.
third. Anyway, continue, Shanine.
I will start it soon. Check out our Redbubble store. Email us at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch and find our videos on YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out the show notes on our website, onegeek411.com. You can find me at the Hoot and Howl on Twitter or Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES on Instagram.
You can find me at I am not prepared with an I.
And I'm Humar Whittle.
Thanks for joining us. Go read a book.
Do some jumping jacks.
I love you.